I was 25 years old, broke enough to count coins before buying gas, and tired in the way only disappointment can make a person tired. Not sleepy, not physically worn out. I mean soul tired. The kind of tired that sinks into your bones after too many interviews, too many fake smiles, too many polite handshakes, and too many emails that begin with "thank you for your interest" and end with "we've decided to move forward with other candidates." By the time that summer came around, I had stopped opening rejection messages right away. I'd let them sit in my inbox for hours like unopened bills because at least while they stayed unread, there was still a tiny chance they said yes. But they never did. I lived in a small rented house on the edge of town, the kind of place with peeling paint, a refrigerator that hummed too loudly, and windows that rattled whenever trucks rolled past. My savings were gone. My confidence had followed. Every morning I'd iron the same 2 shirts, print copies of the same resume, and drive from one side of town to the other trying to look employable. Every evening I came home a little quieter. I had gotten so good at pretending I was fine that even I almost believed it. Almost. The only person who seemed to notice what was really happening was my neighbor, Henry. Henry was 35, broad-shouldered, easygoing, and the kind of man who somehow knew everyone without seeming nosy about it. He lived across the narrow gravel lane from me in a white clapboard house with a porch swing that creaked every time he sat down on it. We weren't close in the dramatic, movie scene sense of friendship, but we had history. He had helped me jump my dead car battery more than once. I had signed for his packages when he worked late. We'd spent a dozen evenings leaning on the fence between our yards, talking about weather, rent, sports neither of us followed too seriously, and life in that half-casual way men often do when they don't want to admit how much they need the conversation. He knew enough to know I was drowning. One evening, after I got back from yet another useless interview, I found him standing near my front steps holding 2 paper cups of coffee. The sun was low, orange across the rooftops, and I must have looked as bad as I felt because he didn't bother with small talk. "Rough one?" he asked. I took the coffee and laughed once under my breath. "You could say that." He studied my face. "They say no again?" "They said they'd let me know." I popped the plastic lid and stared at the steam, which is basically a prettier way of saying no. Henry nodded like he understood that language well. "You still looking for anything? Or only local stuff?" "At this point, I'm looking for oxygen," I said. "If it pays above minimum wage, I'll mop floors, clean gutters, stack boxes, wash dishes, take care of goats, whatever." His expression shifted. Not pity. Not exactly. More like he had been waiting for the right moment to say something. "I might know somebody," he said. I looked up. "Friend of mine lives up in the mountains. Kind of remote. Has property out there. Cabin, land, a workshop, storage sheds. He's older than you, lives alone, and he's been looking for someone reliable." Henry paused. "Caretaker work, mostly. House maintenance, errands, basic help, maybe some cooking if you can manage it, keeping an eye on the place." "That sounds fake," I said at once. "What's wrong with him?" Henry laughed. "Nothing's wrong with him. There's always something wrong with jobs nobody wants. He pays well." "How well?" Henry told me a number that made me blink. I actually thought I'd misheard him. "That's not caretaker money. He includes a room, meals, supplies, whatever you need while you're there. And if you prove dependable, he helps his employees out. He's not cheap. Never has been." I tightened my grip around the paper cup. "Why?" "Because he can afford to be generous, and because he hates incompetence more than he hates spending money." Henry's mouth twitched. "Honestly, you might be exactly what he needs. You're polite, you work hard, and you don't scare easy." I almost said you have me confused with someone else, but desperation got there first. "Who is he?" I asked. "His name's David." "And you trust him?" "With my own sister, if that tells you anything." That mattered. Henry wasn't careless with his opinions. I stared down the street, at the strip of fading sunlight laid over cracked asphalt. It felt like one of those moments that look ordinary from the outside but quietly change the direction of your life. "When would he need me?" Henry took out his phone. "If you want, I can call him right now." I didn't even hesitate. "Yes," I said. Please. Right now. His brows lifted, amused by my urgency. That desperate, huh? You have no idea. He stepped off my porch and paced toward his gate while the phone rang. I stood there pretending not to eavesdrop, but every nerve in me leaned toward his voice. He greeted David casually, then explained my situation in practical terms. My age, my work ethic, my need for a job, the fact that I was decent company and not an idiot. I hated how much relief I felt hearing someone speak well of me when I had almost stopped believing it myself. Henry listened for a while, then glanced back at me. Yeah, he said into the phone. He can come up tomorrow. Another pause. Good. I'll tell him. He ended the call and smiled. That's it. That's it. I stared at him. I got the job? You got the chance. Don't ruin it by showing up late or acting helpless. I almost hugged him. Instead, I swallowed hard and said, Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He pointed at me with the phone. Pack warm clothes. Nights get cold up there even in summer. And be respectful. David likes honesty, discipline, and clean work. I can do that. He gave me a long look, maybe checking if I believed my own words. Yeah, he said finally. I think you can. That night I packed everything I owned that seemed worth taking. Clothes, boots, shaving kit, a few books, chargers, old photographs I never looked at but couldn't throw away, and the cheap duffel bag that had followed me through 3 apartments and 1 failed attempt at community college. I barely slept. My mind ran circles around itself, flipping between hope and suspicion. Jobs like that didn't fall into your lap unless life was either finally rewarding you or setting you up. By dawn, I was on the road. The drive into the mountains took 3 hours. The town disappeared first, then the gas stations, then the billboards, then the neat little signs of civilization that tell you people are nearby. Soon there was only winding road, steep pines, cold blue distance, and the kind of silence that presses against the windows of your car. I should have felt nervous. Instead, I felt lighter with every mile. By the time I turned onto the gravel road Henry had texted me, I was breathing differently. Slower, deeper. The world up there smelled like cedar and stone and clean water. Sunlight broke through the trees in pale gold streaks. The road narrowed, climbed, curved around a rise, and then I saw it. The cabin. Calling it a cabin felt almost unfair. It was built of dark timber and gray stone, wide across the front with a wraparound porch, large windows, and a steep roof that caught the light. It sat against the mountain like it belonged there, rugged and elegant at once, with a detached garage, a shed, and acres of wilderness spreading behind it. It was isolated without looking abandoned, expensive without looking showy. I parked beside a black pickup and killed the engine. For a second, I just sat there. Then the front door opened. A man stepped out onto the porch and made his way down the steps with calm, easy confidence. He looked to be around 40, maybe a little older, but he moved like someone younger, straight-backed, athletic, controlled. He wore dark jeans, boots, and a fitted long-sleeve shirt rolled to the elbows. His hair was slightly longer on top, touched with brown and chestnut under the sun, and his face was the kind that didn't need softness to be handsome. Strong jaw, direct eyes, a quiet self-possession that made the air around him seem more ordered. He smiled before he reached me. You made good time, he said. His voice was low and smooth, polished without sounding artificial. I got out of the car. I left early. Smart. He held out his hand. David. I took it. His grip was firm, warm, steady. I'm Noah. Henry told me. He looked me over. Not rudely, not dismissively, just thoroughly, like a man measuring reality against expectation. Whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him. Welcome. There was something disarming about the way he said it. Not as an employer greeting labor. As though I had arrived somewhere I was genuinely expected. He led me toward the house, taking my bag before I could argue. You don't have to. I know, he said, but I'm carrying it anyway. Inside, the cabin was even more impressive. Warm wood, stone fireplace, clean lines, huge windows overlooking the trees, shelves full of books, antique lamps, heavy rugs. It felt masculine without being cold, tasteful without feeling staged. Someone had built a life here carefully. Coffee? David asked. Yes, sir. His mouth curved slightly. I'm not that old. Heat climbed up my neck. Sorry. Don't apologize. Just call me David. He showed me the kitchen, the pantry, the laundry room, the generator controls, the first aid cabinet, the mudroom storage, the tool wall. Then he led me upstairs and opened a door at the end of the hall. This is your room. I stopped in the doorway. The room was bigger than my entire bedroom back home. Queen bed, dresser, writing desk, thick blankets folded neatly at the foot of the mattress. Window overlooking the valley. Private bathroom attached. This is for me? For now, he said. If you set the kitchen on fire, I may reconsider. I laughed, surprised into it. That seemed to please him. The first day passed in practical rhythm. He explained what needed doing, where supplies were kept, how often deliveries came, which pipes stuck in cold weather, which doors swelled when it rained, which lights flickered if the generator kicked too hard. It wasn't difficult work, but it required attention. He wanted someone observant, not just obedient. I could do observant. By evening, I had helped reorganize a storage shed, split a stack of kindling, carried groceries inside, and learned how David liked his coffee. Black in the morning, one splash of cream after dinner, never sugar. He noticed everything. I noticed that about him right away. You favor your left shoulder when you lift, he said casually while we stocked canned goods. I looked at him. What? You're compensating for strain on the right side. I blinked. I heard it last winter. I figured. You can tell that just from watching me carry beans? A man says more with his body than his mouth. The way he said it made something inside me go still. Later, when we ate dinner together, grilled chicken, roasted potatoes, salad with lemon and cracked pepper, I expected silence or stiff conversation. Instead, David was unexpectedly good company. Funny in a dry, careful way. Well-read without showing off. Curious. He asked about my childhood, my mother, the jobs I'd had, the cities I'd thought about moving to but never could afford. He listened. Really listened. By the end of the meal, some part of me had unclenched. Maybe Henry had been right. Maybe this was real. The days that followed settled into routine, and routine turned out to suit me better than anxiety ever had. Mornings came cold and bright. I woke early, helped with breakfast, checked the property, handled repairs, cleaned, hauled, organized, kept notes, learned fast. David appreciated competence the way some people appreciate praise. He didn't overreact. He simply trusted you more each time you got something right. And when he smiled at me, briefly, often unexpectedly, it felt earned. He kept himself in excellent shape. Every morning he walked the trails before sunrise, sometimes ran them. He ate with discipline, worked with focus, and never seemed lazy with his own life. He was the sort of man who sharpened tools as soon as they dulled and folded dish towels as neatly as dress shirts. There was nothing brittle about him, but there was precision everywhere. I admired that before I was ready to admit it. At first, I told myself he was just an impressive employer. A little intense, maybe. Private in the way a man becomes private when he has been alone too long. But over time, I started noticing things that didn't fit my early assumptions. He never mentioned a wife. Never spoke about dating women. Occasionally, he'd say something half-teasing, half-searching that made me look at him twice. Once, while we were cleaning out an old closet, he held up a flannel shirt I'd left draped over a chair and said, "That color suits you." I laughed it off. Another day I was fixing a porch rail when he came outside with tea and stood watching me longer than necessary. Not in a creepy way, in a quiet, thoughtful one. When I looked up, he didn't look away. "What?" I asked. "You work hard. Is that a compliment?" "It depends. Do you know how rare it is?" I smiled. "Then I'll take it." "Take the tea too," he said, "before it gets cold." And then there were the stranger moments. He'd ask questions that seemed simple but carried a strange undertow. "Do you miss company?" he asked one night while rain tapped against the windows. "What kind of company?" He glanced at me over the rim of his glass. "The kind that makes a house feel less empty." I wasn't sure how to answer, so I said the safest thing. I guess everyone does. Not everyone, he said quietly. Sometimes I caught him studying me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Not staring. Not predatory. Just looking. As if I had become something he was trying not to want. That awareness crept over me slowly. I didn't name it right away because naming it would have changed things. And for the first time in months, I had something worth protecting. Still, I wasn't oblivious. I knew attraction when it entered a room. I just didn't know what I was supposed to do with it when it wore David's face. The truth was, I had always been careful about myself. Cautious. I had known I liked men years before I ever said it aloud. And even then I didn't say it often. Back home, softness got interpreted as weakness and honesty got treated like a confession people could use against you. So I learned how to hold pieces of myself back. Not out of shame exactly, more out of habit. Self-preservation becomes second nature if you practice it long enough. Maybe that was why David unsettled me. He seemed like the kind of man who saw what I tried to hide and waited for me to notice he had seen it. One evening, about a month after I arrived, he called me into the living room after dinner. I threw my back out splitting wood yesterday, he said. Would you mind helping me with some muscle cream? That seemed normal enough. He worked hard. People got sore. Sure. He led me upstairs to his room. That should have made me more nervous than it did. His bedroom was spacious and understated, same as the rest of the house. Dark wood, crisp sheets, books stacked on the nightstand, a window facing the trees. He shut the door, not all the way, just enough to keep out the draft, and handed me the cream. Shoulders mostly, he said. Then he turned his back to me and pulled off his shirt. For one suspended second, my brain forgot how to function. David wasn't just fit. He was built. Broad shoulders, narrow waist, defined back, the kind of quiet strength that came from labor and discipline instead of vanity. A pale scar ran diagonally along one side of his ribs. His skin was warm-toned, clean, real. Not the polished kind of beauty you see in magazines, but better for being human. My throat tightened. You all right? He asked, and I realized I had gone still. Yeah, I said too quickly. Yeah. I squeezed some cream into my palms and tried to act normal. I failed. The moment my hands touched his skin, something electric moved through me. Not fantasy. Not performance. Just awareness so sharp it felt like standing too close to a live wire. His muscles flexed beneath my hands. He exhaled low and slow. I focused on the practical task, shoulder blades, upper back, tension points, but my pulse was loud enough to drown out reason. This okay? I asked. Yes, he said. Only that. Just yes. But there was something in his voice. Something softened. Something almost dangerous in how controlled it was. When I finished, I stepped back too fast. There, I said. That should help. He turned to face me, shirt still in his hand, and I had the absurd urge to look anywhere else. Instead, I met his eyes. Big mistake. He knew. Not everything. Maybe not even enough. But he knew that moment had unsettled me. Thank you, he said. You're welcome. Neither of us moved. Then he smiled, slight and unreadable, and pulled the shirt back on. I left the room more shaken than I wanted to admit. After that, the air between us changed. Nothing obvious. Nothing anyone else would have noticed. But I felt it in the pauses, in the glances, in the way silence deepened instead of thinning out. We still worked side by side. Still ate together. Still talked about books, storms, music, repairs, politics, childhood disasters, bad coffee, old injuries. Only now there was charge under all of it. A week later, he asked me to clean one of the ceiling vents in the study. The ladder was old and narrow, so I stood on a sturdy wooden table beneath the fixture while David held it steady from below. Can you reach? He asked. Barely. Lean a little left. Easy for you to say. He laughed under his breath. You're doing fine. I stretched higher, one hand braced against the ceiling, the other working dust out of the vent slats. I could feel his presence below me. Solid, close, impossible to ignore. When I glanced down, he was looking up, not at the vent, at me. His hands were wrapped around the edge of the table, strong and tan against the wood, and his gaze moved over me with no confusion in it anymore. No accidental quality. He looked like a man who had stopped lying to himself. A strange heat rolled through me. "David." He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice came out rougher than usual. "Yes." I swallowed. "You're staring." "Yes," he said again. My heartbeat slammed once against my ribs. He wasn't smiling. I climbed down more carefully than I'd climbed up, suddenly aware that the room had become too small. The second my boots hit the floor, we were close, closer than we had ever been without a task to explain it. Dust floated in the sunlight around us. My chest rose and fell too fast. David stepped back first. "Sorry," he said, though he didn't sound sorry. He sounded strained. "That was unfair." I grabbed a rag off the desk and wiped my hands even though they weren't dirty. "It's fine." "No," he said. "It isn't." Then he walked out of the room. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling in my room, replaying every look, every word, every accidental brush of hands at the sink, or the pantry door, or the porch rail. I told myself I should leave. I told myself I should keep things professional. I told myself attraction was not a plan and desire was not safety, and nothing good ever came from mixing money with loneliness. Then I remembered the way he said my name when I handed him his coffee, the way he listened when I talked, the way he made space for me in a life that had clearly been arranged for one. It would have been easier if I didn't want him back. But I did. I just didn't know what wanting him would cost. 2 nights later, after dinner, he asked me to join him on the back porch. The sky was indigo, the trees black against the horizon, stars beginning to burn through the dusk. He poured us both a drink, whiskey for him, soda for me, and leaned against the railing. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "I owe you an apology." I looked at him. "For what?" "For putting you in an uncomfortable position." His fingers tightened lightly around the glass. "In the study." I took a slow breath. "You didn't do anything." "I wanted to." That honesty hit me harder than any flirtation could have. He looked out into the dark. "Not at me. I've spent the better part of a month trying to convince myself that you were simply good company. Capable, kind, easy to have here. And that should have been enough." A faint, humorless smile touched his mouth. "It wasn't." My pulse climbed. He continued, voice calm but edged with effort. "Henry knows I'm gay. I assume he didn't tell you because it wasn't his business to tell." "He didn't. I didn't intend to make it yours either." He finally turned toward me. "You work for me. You needed a job. There are a dozen reasons I should have kept clearer boundaries." "But," I asked softly, "but I haven't wanted someone around like this in a very long time." The night seemed to sharpen around us. He set his glass down on the railing. "If I've made your home here feel unsafe, say the word. I'll pay you through the month and arrange for Henry to help you get settled back in town." No argument. That should have made my decision easy. A good man was giving me an exit. Instead, I asked the worst possible question. "What if I don't want to leave?" Something flickered across his face. Surprise first, then caution, then a hope so carefully restrained it almost hurt to see. "Then," he said slowly, "I'd ask what you do want." I looked down at my hands. The truth sat in my throat, heavy and hot. "I don't know," I admitted. "I know this job matters to me. I know being here matters to me. And I know—" I hesitated. David waited. "I know I feel things when I'm around you that I haven't felt in a long time." His silence was gentle, not pushing. "I didn't expect any of this," I said. "I came here trying to survive. That was it. Rent, food, breathing room. Then you turned out to be—" I laughed once, embarrassed. "You." He stepped closer, but not too close. Close enough to show intent, far enough to leave me space. "And what am I?" he asked. I met his eyes. "Dangerous," I said. That made him smile for real. "Only when provoked." I should have laughed. Instead, I stared at his mouth. He noticed. Of course he noticed. "Tell me to stop," he said quietly. "And I will." There was no pressure in his tone. No manipulation. No claim. Just a door left open. I had spent so much of my life being careful that the act of choosing felt almost radical. So I stepped forward. Just once. Just enough. David lifted a hand to my face slowly, giving me time to pull away. His thumb brushed the edge of my jaw. Warm. Steady. My breath caught. He searched my expression like he needed certainty, then leaned in and kissed me. Not hard. Not stolen. Not like a man taking something. Like a man asking. And when I kissed him back, it changed. The restraint in him trembled. His free hand slid to my waist. Mine caught in the front of his shirt. The kiss deepened, rich and slow and devastating. All heat and relief and the sudden collapse of every distance we had been trying to maintain. I felt it in my chest, in my knees, in the dizzy tilt of my thoughts. When we finally broke apart, I was breathing like I'd run a mile. David rested his forehead against mine. "You have no idea," he murmured. "How hard that has been to resist." I laughed breathlessly. "I'm starting to." He kissed me once more, gentler this time, and then pulled back just enough to look at me. "Listen to me carefully. Nothing happens tonight unless you are absolutely sure." "I mean that." I nodded. He studied my face. "Noah, I'm sure I want this," I said. "I'm just not sure what comes after." His expression softened. "That," he said, "we can figure out." We didn't go to his bed that night. Not because the want wasn't there. It was there in every inch between us. But because sometimes the most intimate thing two men can do is stop before they ruin a fragile truth by moving too fast. We sat on the porch instead, shoulder to shoulder beneath a wool blanket while the mountain wind moved through the pines. We talked, really talked, about things I had never said easily. The first time I realized I liked boys, the first time I learned not to say it, the relationships that never became relationships because fear or distance or cowardice got there first. David told me about his own life in pieces, about leaving a city he never loved, about building a quieter one in the mountains, about men who wanted him privately but never publicly, about the loneliness that hardens if you let it. He never made himself the victim of his own story. That was one of the things I was beginning to love about him. Yes, love. I knew it too early. I knew it before it was reasonable. But some truths arrive whole. When we finally stood to go inside, the house felt different. Not like a workplace. Not even like a secret. Like the beginning of something. Still, beginnings are not endings, and wanting someone does not magically erase fear. The next morning I woke up in my own room and immediately wondered whether I had imagined everything. Then I found David in the kitchen making coffee, sleeves rolled up, sunlight on his hair, and he looked at me with a softness that turned my doubt to ash. "Morning," he said. "Morning." He handed me a mug. Our fingers brushed. Tiny thing. Nothing dramatic. Yet somehow more intimate than the kiss had been. The days after that unfolded carefully. We didn't announce anything because there was no one to announce it to. We didn't rush into labels because the mountain didn't require labels from us. But we moved around each other with growing tenderness. A touch to my lower back as he passed behind me in the kitchen. My hand lingering at his wrist when he handed me tools. His habit of finding excuses to stand close. Mine of looking for him out the window whenever he went down the trail alone. At night we spent more time together. Sometimes in the living room, sometimes on the porch, sometimes in his room, talking until the quiet between us became its own language. He kissed like a man who had learned patience the hard way. Slow, thorough, impossibly attentive. He always paused for permission without making it awkward, and that gentleness undid me more than boldness ever could have. Weeks passed before we slept in the same bed. Not because he lacked desire. Not because I did. Because he wanted my trust as much as my body, and I wanted to give him both without dividing myself on the way there. The night it finally happened. Rain was drumming softly on the roof and the power had flickered twice. I had come into his room to bring fresh towels and stayed because leaving felt pointless. We talked for an hour about meaningless things, then about meaningful things, then not at all. David sat on the edge of the bed, looking up at me like I was the answer to something he had stopped asking for. "Come here," he said quietly. I did. He touched my waist, my hands, my face, as if reacquainting himself with something precious. When he kissed me, it began with the same care he had always shown me. But this time there was no pulling away, no stopping at the door of what we wanted. His mouth moved against mine with hunger softened by restraint, and when I climbed into his lap, the sound he made nearly unmade me. Even then he whispered, "Tell me if you want me to stop." I kissed him harder for an answer. That night was not about urgency. It was about discovery. Every touch felt new, not because I had never been touched before, but because I had never been touched by someone who treated desire like devotion. He was strong, yes, and certain, and there were moments when the force of wanting each other left us both shaking, but nothing about it felt careless. He learned me. I learned him. We moved through hesitance into trust, through trust into pleasure, and through pleasure into something quieter and deeper that stayed long after the trembling stopped. When I woke before dawn, I was wrapped in warm sheets and David's arm was heavy across my waist. For a few disoriented seconds, I forgot where I was. Then he tightened his hold in his sleep and I smiled into the pillow. No one had ever held me like that. Not possessively, not accidentally, deliberately, as if keeping me close was the most natural thing in the world. It should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like rest. The months that followed were the happiest of my life and, because life rarely allows happiness to go untested, also the most clarifying. I learned the sounds of that mountain in every season. Morning birds in the pines, whined through the eaves before storms, the deep hush of early snowfall, the creak of porch boards under David's boots. I learned how he looked when he was focused, when he was annoyed, when he was trying not to laugh, when he was thinking about kissing me in the middle of a conversation and pretending he wasn't. I learned his habits. He read in bed with one lamp on and one foot out from under the blanket. He hated overcooked vegetables, loved old jazz, and always checked locks twice before sleep. He could repair nearly anything mechanical but had no patience for flimsy kitchen gadgets. He remembered every casual preference I ever mentioned and quietly accounted for it later. One day I said I missed peach pie from a diner back home. 2 weeks later he drove an hour into town and came back with peaches. Another afternoon I scraped my palm open fixing wire near the shed. He cleaned it with the concentration of a surgeon and kissed the bandage afterward without saying a word. A man can get used to tenderness faster than he realizes. That was the dangerous part. By the time autumn turned the mountain gold and rust, I couldn't imagine leaving. Yet leaving had been part of the plan all along, hadn't it? I came for work, not forever. I came for money, not love. I came because I had nowhere else to go, and somewhere along the way nowhere else had become here. That realization landed hard. One evening I found myself standing alone on the upper deck just after sunset, watching mist gather in the valley below. The world looked unreal in that half-light. Blue ridges fading into one another, treetops swallowing the last gold, the cabin windows glowing behind me like warmth made visible. I heard the door open. David joined me without speaking. For a while we stood shoulder to shoulder. Then he said, "You've been somewhere else all day." I exhaled. "I've been thinking. That usually means trouble." I smiled faintly. "Probably." He waited. I loved that about him too. He never rushed me to fill silence. "What happens when this stops being a job?" I asked. He was quiet for a moment. "Hasn't it already?" I turned to him. "You know what I mean." "Yes," he said. "I do." The wind lifted the front of my jacket. I shoved my hands into my pockets. "I don't want to be the boy you hired and then felt sorry for." His brows drew together. "Is that what you think this is?" "No, not most of the time. But sometimes—" I swallowed. "Sometimes I remember how I got here. Desperate, broke, grateful. And then I look at you and I wonder if I'd have let myself feel any of this if my life had been stable when we met." David faced me fully. "Noah." There was enough weight in my name to make me look at him. "I did not fall for you because you needed help. I fell for you because you are intelligent, observant, kind under pressure, stubborn when challenged, and brave in ways you don't even recognize." His voice stayed even, but emotion thickened underneath it. "You made this house alive again. You made me laugh in rooms that had been quiet for years. You saw me. That isn't charity. That isn't pity. And it certainly isn't convenience. Something tight in my chest started to loosen. He stepped closer. If you left tomorrow with more money in your pocket than when you came, I would still want you. If you had shown up rich, spoiled, and impossible, I would not. Your circumstances brought you here. They are not the reason I love you. Love. He had said it so simply that, for a second, the entire world narrowed to that one word. I stared at him. He seemed to realize what he had done only after it was already in the air. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. I wasn't planning to say it like that. My throat burned. Then how were you planning to say it? He gave a helpless little laugh. Ideally? Better. I should have teased him. Instead, I said the only honest thing I had. I love you too. The expression on his face at that moment is one I will carry for the rest of my life. Not shock. Not triumph. Relief so profound it looked almost like pain. He pulled me against him and kissed me under the darkening sky while the first cold edge of winter moved through the trees. After that, the future became less abstract. Not easy, just possible. We talked about practical things because real love lives or dies in practical things. My savings had begun to rebuild. David wanted to put me on formal salary paperwork with profit sharing on some seasonal rental income from a second property. I told him that sounded dangerously close to turning me into a kept man. He told me not to flatter myself and then spent the next hour explaining tax structures. We laughed more after that conversation than during it. In late November, I drove into town alone for supplies and ran into Henry outside a hardware store. He took one look at my face and leaned against the side of the building with a grin. Well, he said. Well, what? You look different. I tried for innocence. Maybe mountain air suits me. It might, he said. Or maybe my friend finally stopped acting like a monk. I nearly choked on my own breath. You knew. Henry snorted. Please. David hasn't looked at a man platonically a day in his life, and you were practically glowing by week 3. I rubbed a hand over my mouth, laughing despite myself. He sobered a little then. You okay with it? I thought of the cabin, the porch, the bed upstairs, David's hand at the small of my back, the way he said my name when he was half asleep, the way he had given me dignity before he ever asked for affection. Yeah, I said quietly. I really am. Henry nodded like that was all he needed. Good. Were you setting us up? He considered that. I was hoping 2 lonely men with functioning eyes might sort themselves out. I shook my head. He slapped my shoulder. Just don't break his heart. He's worse than you are at pretending not to have one. When I got back to the mountain, I found David in the kitchen slicing apples. He looked up as I came in. You took longer than expected. Ran into Henry. His knife paused. And I set the bags down on the counter. And apparently he's been watching this whole thing unfold like an overpaid matchmaker. David actually closed his eyes. Oh, that's unfortunate. I laughed. He likes you. He enjoys being right, David corrected. That too. He put the knife down and came around the counter to kiss me hello. It was quick, familiar, affectionate. The kind of kiss that says you're home. Home. That word stopped feeling fictional sometime around then. Winter came fully not long after. Snow settled deep around the cabin, softening the roof lines and muting the world. We shoveled paths, stacked more wood, cooked heavier meals, drank coffee by the fire, and learned each other in new weather. David was even more beautiful in winter. Flushed from cold, hair damp from snowmelt, sweaters pulled tight across his shoulders, hands warmed around a mug before touching me. On Christmas Eve, a storm cut the power entirely. The generator kicked in late, failed, and left us with lantern light and the crackle of the fireplace. We should have been annoyed. Instead it felt intimate, almost old-fashioned. The cabin lit in amber shadow while wind rattled the panes. We ate dinner by firelight. Afterward, David disappeared upstairs and came back with a small wrapped box. I stared at it. What's this? A gift, he said. I know it's a gift. I mean, why? Because it's Christmas, Noah. I took the box and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a wristwatch, leather band, simple face, elegant without being flashy. My chest tightened. David. He shrugged like it was nothing. You're late less often than most people. I thought it was time you had something worth being punctual for. I laughed, then looked at him again and nearly didn't trust my voice. It's beautiful. He watched as I fastened it on. It looks right on you. I set the box aside and crossed the room. I didn't get you anything this nice. That's good, he murmured as I climbed into his lap. I'd hate for you to ruin my reputation. I kissed him until the joke dissolved. Later that night, curled against him under heavy blankets while snow hammered the roof, I realized something that would have terrified the man I used to be. I was no longer waiting for this happiness to be taken away. I was beginning to believe I deserved it. Spring returned gradually, then all at once. Snow retreated into the higher shadows. Streams loosened. Wildflowers crept across the slopes. The cabin emerged from winter with that same solid patience it seemed to hold through everything. So did we. By then, nearly a year had passed since I first drove up the mountain with a duffel bag and a head full of worry. I had come looking for employment. I had found work, yes, but also steadiness, desire, tenderness, and a man who could look at me in total silence and make me feel more known than a lifetime of conversation ever had. One evening in early summer, almost exactly a year after my arrival, David and I stood on the porch watching the sunset pour gold over the valley. You know, he said, I expected you to leave after 3 months. I looked at him. Really? You struck me as restless. I was. And now, I slipped my hand into his. Now I'm exactly where I want to be. He turned, studying my face with that same thoughtful intensity he'd had the day we met. Maybe stronger now because it carried history, shared mornings, shared storms, shared nights, shared truth. You changed my life, he said. I smiled softly. You changed mine first. He lifted my hand and kissed the inside of my wrist, right over the pulse. Below us, the trees moved in the evening wind like dark water. Above us, the sky opened wide and clear, and inside that mountain silence, inside that hard-won, astonishing peace, I thought about the boy who had arrived here desperate enough to accept any job, any chance, any escape from failure. He had driven up the mountain convinced he was coming to take care of a lonely older man in a remote cabin. He had no idea the truth was far stranger and far kinder. I took a job at a mountain cabin. And then he looked at me like I was something worth keeping. He gave me work when I needed dignity. He gave me honesty when I needed courage. He gave me his heart when I was still learning how to trust my own. And in the end, somewhere between the pine trees and the porch light, the snowfall and the thaw, the careful first kiss and the 1,000 easy ones after, I stopped being a man who was merely trying to survive. I became a man who was loved. By David. By the mountain. By the life we built with our own hands. And if you ask me now what happened after I took that job, I can answer in one sentence. I went there looking for a future, and found the man I wanted to spend it with.